All right, let's jump right into this explainer and decode what is honestly the ultimate biological paradox in modern agriculture: growing premium wine exactly on the equator. For centuries, I mean literally hundreds of years, the golden rule of viticulture has been that quality grapevines can only really thrive between latitudes 30 and 50. But down in Ecuador, right on latitude zero, they're completely tossing that ancient rulebook out the window. Today we're going to explore how human ingenuity, some seriously rigorous science, and totally extreme geography are combining to rewrite the laws of winemaking.
So think about this for a second. How do you grow a four-season plant when you have absolutely zero seasons? That is our central mystery here. See, traditional grapevines are biologically hardwired for four distinct seasons. They absolutely demand winter dormancy, a deep, cold sleep, and shifting daylight to trigger their growth. But Ecuador? It's basically a perennial tropics. You've got constant 12-hour days and zero natural winters. So how on earth do you keep a plant alive, let alone produce award-winning wine, when nature flat out refuses to give it the seasons it needs to survive? Here is our roadmap for the explainer. We'll start with the Latitude Zero paradox, look at simulating seasons through cyclic pruning, mastering induced water stress, explore Andean volcanic minerality, check out coastal deserts and salinity, and finally, look at the actual taste of extreme wine.
Just take a look at the wild contrast on your screen right now. On one side, we've got vineyards sitting at a staggering 2,500 meters up in the Andes Mountains, right underneath snow-capped active volcanoes. And on the other, completely bone-dry, sea-level coastal deserts where it practically never rains. These aren't your gentle, rolling European hills, folks. These are intense, extreme landscapes that force the vines to adapt in some truly incredible biological ways.
But before we get into the solutions, we have to understand the big threat here, which is something called the growth continuum. Think of a grapevine like a marathon runner. Without a winter to sleep and recover, a vine planted at the equator just keeps running. Because it's always warm, the plant tries to do everything at once, growing new shoots, flowering, and ripening fruit simultaneously. It burns through its vital starch reserves so fast that, without human intervention, it literally works itself to death by exhaustion in under a decade.
So, Section 2, simulating seasons through cyclic pruning. This is how they trick the biological clock. Viticulturists actually replace autumn and winter with a radical, highly scientific technique called cyclic or double pruning. Step 1 is the production pruning, which is carefully timed so the grapes ripen during the driest part of the year. But Step 2, this is where it gets crazy. It's called resting pruning. The farmers literally go in and cut away newly formed, perfectly good bunches of grapes. I know, sacrificing your own crop sounds completely insane, but they have to do it to forcibly stop the plant from fruiting, which redirects all its energy back down into the trunk and roots. It's a manual hack to let the vine recover and store up the starch it would normally save during a snowy winter. You can actually see these really intense surgical cuts here. This isn't just your standard Sunday garden trimming. This is a hard, physical override of the plant's continuous growth cycle. Inducing this programmed rest is absolutely critical if you want the vineyard to survive long term.
Moving into Section 3, mastering induced water stress to engineer artificial dormancy. Normally, freezing weather shuts a plant down, but here they engineer a fake winter using induced water stress. How? They just completely, abruptly shut off the drip irrigation. And let me tell you, the plant absolutely panics. It thinks a massive drought just hit, so it goes straight into survival mode. It immediately slams its stomata shut, those are the pores on the leaves, to lock in moisture, and pulls all its energy inward. Basically, by cutting the water, they've successfully tricked the vine into artificial hibernation.
But, water is only half the battle. They also have to hack the sun. Ecuador has 12 hours of sunlight every single day year-round. In a place like France, the shorter days of autumn trigger a hormone in the plant called ABA, which tells the grapes to ripen their tannins. But without those shorter days, the vines in Ecuador don't get that ABA signal. It creates this terrifying timing mismatch. The intense equatorial sun pumps the grapes full of sugar super fast, but the tannins are still green and totally bitter. To fix this, growers use extreme canopy management to stress the bunches, and sometimes even apply ABA supplements just to force the tannins to mature before the sugar gets too high. All right, Section 4, Andean volcanic minerality.
Let's head up into the Avenue of the Volcanoes.
Check out this deep soil profile. This is what's known as andesols, super porous, geologically young earth made from thousands of years of volcanic ash. Because this soil drains water incredibly fast, even torrential tropical rains won't drown the plants. Instead, this extreme drainage forces the roots to dive way, way deep into the earth just to find moisture. And as they dig down, they're sucking up all these intense microminerals like potassium and magnesium. It's this exact biological struggle that injects the wine with its incredibly distinct complex minerality. But hey, the roots are only half the story. Look at what's going on above ground. Up at 2,500 meters, the atmosphere is dangerously thin, so the UVB solar radiation is just brutal. To survive being baked, the grapes biologically engineer their own polyphenol shield. They grow noticeably thicker skins and trigger a massive metabolic spike in polyphenols and anthocyanins. It's literally chemical sunscreen. And for the winemaker, that stress is an absolute gift. It gives you these deeply colored, almost opaque violet wines with incredibly dense, age-worthy tannins.
Which brings us down to Section 5, Coastal Deserts and Salinity, surviving the sea-level desert.
Now, Ecuador is famous for its lush rainforests, right? So the Santa Elena Peninsula shouldn't technically be a desert, but it is, all thanks to the Humboldt Current. This massive flow of freezing water coming up from Antarctica chills the coastal air so much that rain clouds literally cannot form. So the vines have to survive entirely on drip irrigation and this weird, dense morning fog called the garua. But the crazy upside to zero rain? Fungal diseases like mildew basically don't exist here. It is an absolute sanitary paradise for organic viticulture.
But every paradise has a catch, right? In this desert, the hot sun evaporates the irrigation water so fast that it leaves behind a toxic, salty crust right on the surface. If they leave it, it'll poison the vines. So, viticulturists have to engineer this crucial soil washing technique. During the vine's dormancy, they use controlled floods of water to dissolve that salt crust and flush the sodium chloride deep underground, totally away from the feeding roots.
Okay, Section 6, the taste of extreme wine. Let's see how all this science actually translates to the palate.
This table maps it out perfectly. It shows how intense environmental stress directly creates these wild flavors. Up in the high Andes, that brutal UV radiation and deep volcanic ash give you these powerful, thick-skinned Syrahs with massive structural tannins and a really rustic, earthy minerality. But then on the coast, those sandy, arid soils produce these incredibly vibrant white wines with amazing acidic freshness and actual saline, salty notes.
I absolutely love this quote from our sources because it totally hits the nail on the head. When they meticulously control that coastal desert salinity through soil flushing, it doesn't just taste like a mouthful of seawater. It transforms. It becomes an elegant, refined mineral character reminiscent of marine iodine and the Pacific breeze. The environmental stress isn't a flaw here. It is the exact mechanism that gives these wines their totally unique, mouthwatering identities.
And that leads us to one final, really provocative thought to wrap up this explainer. For centuries, the global wine industry has relied on the predictable, gentle seasons of temperate climates. But we all know our climate is shifting fast, and those predictable seasons are starting to vanish. By successfully hacking the grapevine to thrive on the equator by simulating seasons and mastering drought, Ecuador is proving that the boundaries of agriculture are meant to be pushed. It really leaves you wondering, do these biological hackers at Latitude Zero actually hold the survival blueprint for the future of wine everywhere? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me, and keep questioning the rules.